third topical issue in the name of Deputy Colm Keaveney to the Minister for Health. Is the need to replace the Mobility Allowance.
Thank you, Chairperson. The Government pride themselves as a government that puts equality front and centre of every decision and their policies. Chairperson, nearly 1,000 days ago, the Government abolished the Mobility Grant, a scheme that allowed for the provision of supports and allowance for transport for people with disability. Minister, you will know today that disability campaigners from across the country have launched their general election 2016 campaign policy objective. And one of the objectives with respect to disability is the commitment that the Government gave in 2013, nearly 1,000 days ago, that they would extend a new scheme. The objective of the question and the topical issue is to afford you an opportunity to explain to the community, the citizens involved and concerned about mobility, isolation, getting to and from work, what progress you have made in the area of offering an alternative scheme, and what are the hurdles, the barriers, if any at all. You did decide at that time describe the situation as atrocious. And it was atrocious in 2013, and it's atrocious today. I would be grateful if you would use the opportunity in your response to give some light hope to those people who are entitled to play a full and active role as citizens in this Republic with respect to engaging in community. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank the Deputy, and I would have to say that Deputy Keaveney has been one of the deputies that has been persistent in this issue, and I would tell you, Deputy, that there is not a week goes by where we don't have some kind of engagement in the department around this issue. It has been one of the most intractable issues that I've come across. I usually can find a solution to most things, but in relation to this, it has proved the most difficult. But the Government decided that the detailed preparatory work required for a new transport support scheme, and I think it is the language around it will be important as well into the future. I'm sure you accept that. Associated with statutory provisions should be progressed by the Minister for Health. The Department is seeking a solution which would best meet the aim of supporting people with severe disabilities who require additional income to contribute towards the cost of their mobility needs, while remaining within the available budget and satisfying all legal and equality concern. Work is ongoing on the policy proposals to be brought to Government for the drafting of primary legislation for a new scheme. The proposals seek to ensure that there is a firm statutory basis for the scheme's operation, which there wasn't. I'm sure the Deputy already knows that. There is transparency and equality in the eligibility criteria attaching to the scheme, which again was very much piecemeal, depending on where you lived, you know, whether or not you were successful in your application. Resources are targeted at those with the greatest needs, and the scheme is capable of being costed and is affordable, and its introduction on an ongoing basis. The draft general scheme and heads of bill have been the subject of very detailed discussions with the Department's legal advisers. It is intended to submit legislative proposals to Government for consideration in a matter of weeks, Deputy. You'll be glad to hear that, following finalisation of legal consideration and consultation with other key departments. On foot of a Government decision, monthly payments have continued to be made by the Health Service Executive to the 4,700 people who were in receipt. That was my key consideration. I was seriously worried that people who were in receipt and had become part of their income. We all know, I mean, I'm not puritanical about what people do with their money when they receive it, but it was part of their income now, and I was insisting that this would not be removed. But it has proved to be very difficult. How do you ensure that the people who are now in receipt are continue to be protected, and also allow for, if you like, the criteria, the pathway nationally to be put in place in order to ensure that those who wish to enter a new scheme would in fact have access to it? I have to tell you as well, Deputy, and maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but the amount of money allocated in terms of what we already do will not be enough. It will not be enough, and we know that. So we do have, if you like, provision to ensure that where additional money is necessary, that will happen. But it's not something I'm not conscious of. I'm very conscious of it, because I do believe that if you cannot access the outside world, then you cannot participate in society. And we are determined that the legislation, which should have been there in the first place, of course, but wasn't, the legislation which will be necessary to underpin a scheme like this will in fact be brought to government very shortly.
Deputy Keaveney.
Minister, I'm taking 2 years.
Yes.
The scheme and the response that you heard today is the same response that you given in February 2013. It's the same number of citizens, people with disability, who are ring-fenced by the current arrangement or the inertia. Because my concern is for the many other citizens who are emerging through society, who don't have the same capacity to fully integrate, play an active role as citizens. As a consequence, I come from a very rural constituency. I had an opportunity over the course of the recent past to travel that constituency and meet people who are gravely concerned about the inequality that's been created by the inaction. You have ring-fenced the payment to 4,700 people. And I would be grateful in your response if you could give hope to those citizens who are emerging with disability, who have no access to the current arrangement, and what hope you will give to them in a prompt legislative response.
Deputy, I think most people that know me in here know that I'm not one to hang around and keep looking at the problem. My philosophy in life is to find a solution as quickly as possible. This one has been more difficult than most. We would have preferred, of course, if we could have retained the old scheme, maybe put a legislative framework around it and allowed it to expand. That wasn't possible because of circumstances outside of this House that I think you are aware of. But however, it is important to note that the disabled drivers and disabled passenger scheme operated by the revenue commissioners remain in place. This scheme provides VRT and VAT relief and exemption from road tax and fuel grant to drivers and passengers with a disability who qualify under the relevant criteria set out in the governing regulations made by the Minister for Finance. I can assure the Deputy that the development of legislative proposals to replace the Mobility Allowance and the motorised transport grant remain a priority. But I would have to say to you equally, Deputy, that I suppose because we think differently now about disability, and that's a good thing. You know, we're more open, we're more challenged, I suppose, by putting services in place that allow people to make decisions for themselves. And I think the capacity legislation was a major step along the road in that. I think what we will put in place needs to have the type of flexibility that will ensure that people's different needs, as they emerge into the future, we will in fact be able to meet. But it's not something that simply doesn't appear on our radar every week, Deputy. It does and will continue to do so. And I would agree with yourself, something that does need to be dealt with. But unfortunately, it has proved to be very, very difficult. But I hope now, that we have a mechanism in relation to this new legislation which will ensure that that can happen. So thank you.